Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Evan Thorne returned to his quiet lakeside cabin, he expected peace, not a steel fence slicing through his land and a sign declaring his own dock off-limits. What began as a property dispute soon unraveled into a web of lies, forged maps, and a war no one saw coming. When I pulled my truck off the winding county road and onto the gravel driveway, I expected the same quiet view of pine trees and glassy lake water that had greeted me for decades. Instead, the first thing that caught my eye was a line of dull gray steel glinting through the morning mist like a scar across the land. I slowed to a crawl, my heart kicked once, hard, as I realized it wasn't some temporary construction barrier. Someone had built a fence, a tall, freshly painted metal fence with vertical bars and a heavy padlocked gate, right where my yard met the shoreline. And bolted to the center of the gate was a shiny sign in block letters: Private Lake Access, Silver Pines HOA members only, trespassers will be prosecuted. The words looked like a slap in the face. My pier, the one my father and I had built with our own hands 25 years ago, now stuck out on the wrong side of the fence like an amputated limb. I parked and walked down, crunching through old pine needles, half expecting someone to jump out and yell this was a prank. Up close, the fence was worse. Not some amateur weekend job, but proper commercial-grade steel posts, set deep in concrete, painted hunter green to blend with nature. The line didn't follow the actual property boundary, but cut a straight swath across my land, stealing a good 20 feet of shoreline. My old wooden sign, Private Lake Access, Property of Thorne, was gone. Only the screw holes in the cedar post remained, like bullet wounds. I crouched to study the dirt and saw tire tracks, heavy equipment tracks leading in from the back trail where the old logging road runs. Someone had planned this. I yanked my phone from my jacket and dialed the county land office. After 10 minutes of hold music and shuffling, a cheerful young clerk told me the new Silver Pines waterfront plan had been approved in January, and that updated boundaries had been recorded. I asked her to email me the map. When it popped up on my screen, I swore out loud. According to this new plan, my property ended before the water line, and everything between the fence and the lake was labeled community managed space. The document had the HOA's name and 2 county signatures dated the last day of December. The county must have been half empty for the holidays then. I told the clerk there had to be a mistake. She said I could file a dispute, but warned there's a backlog. I drove into the nearest town that afternoon and walked into the county office myself, clutching my deed and the old 1997 agreement. The receptionist flipped through my paperwork without much interest and pointed to the new map on the wall. "That's what's on file now," she said. "If you think it's wrong, fill out these forms." She slid me a clipboard full of dense legalese. I pressed her about the 1997 agreement with the state declaring the lake a public resource. She shrugged. "That would be up to our legal team. We just process the plats." It was like arguing with a vending machine. Back at the cabin, the sun was low, throwing long orange fingers across the frozen lake. The fence threw its own shadow, a neat green line separating me from my own pier. I walked along it, testing for weak spots like an inmate casing a prison yard. Every post was solid. The padlock was brand new. Even the gate had a keypad bolted on for some kind of entry code. On the other side, my boat bobbed gently against the pier, now technically trespassing according to the sign. I took a photo of it all from every angle and stored it in a folder labeled Evidence. I stood there a long time, staring at that sign with its stiff corporate font, Silver Pines HOA. I'd known about the development up the hill, identical McMansions with white fences and manicured lawns, but I'd never given them a second thought. Live and let live. Apparently, they didn't share the sentiment. Someone had used my absence to redraw the map, fence off the water, and dare me to fight them for it. I could feel my jaw tighten. The lake had been my father's before me. The pier, the shoreline, even the pine stand behind me were full of memories. Whoever thought this was just another plot of real estate had no idea what kind of fight they'd picked. The next morning started with frost on the windows and steam rising from my coffee. But it didn't take long for the silence to shatter. Around 9, I heard tires crunching up the gravel. I glanced out the window and saw a pearl-white Lexus SUV pull up like it belonged there. A woman stepped out, late 50s, power-styled haircut, sunglasses, clipboard in hand, like some suburban general arriving to inspect the troops. She wore a quilted vest and heels that sank into the soil with every step. I stepped onto the porch before she could knock. "Can I help you?" She smiled with the slow, tight smile of someone who thought they were about to teach a toddler how to behave. "Mr. Thorne, I presume? Evan, is it?" "Evan's fine," I said, crossing my arms. She walked forward as if we were old friends. "I'm Karen Westbrook, president of the Silver Pines HOA. I'm here to welcome you into our lakeside community and provide some important documents about your status." I didn't shake her hand. She didn't seem to mind. From her clipboard, she pulled a heavy packet, bound, tabbed, printed in color. "This contains your welcome letter, a copy of the HOA guidelines, your property assessment, and your discounted initiation invoice. We're waiving part of the one-time fee as a gesture of goodwill, $3,200 instead of the usual $5. Monthly dues are $600. I stared at her like she was handing me a pizza menu at a funeral. "I'm not part of your HOA." She gave a gentle laugh, as if I'd made a joke. "Oh, I hear that a lot when people first move in. But according to our revised community map, your property now falls within the Silver Pines boundary. All lakeside access is managed by the HOA. That includes shoreline preservation, dock regulation, and water use." I didn't move. "That shoreline has been part of this land since long before your first cookie-cutter home went up that hill. I have a deed. I have a 1997 agreement with the state that designates the lake as a public resource." Her expression barely changed, just a tightening at the corners of her mouth. "Mr. Thorne, old agreements become outdated. Zoning evolves. The county approved our revised boundary plans last December, and it was recorded in January. Your absence during the review period was noted in our minutes. You built a fence on my land. We installed a community perimeter barrier," she said, voice smooth as glass. "You'll find it conforms to the new lines filed with the county. If you believe there's been a mistake, you're welcome to dispute it through appropriate channels. Meanwhile, unauthorized use of community infrastructure, such as the pier or shoreline, will be subject to penalties." I stepped down off the porch and got right in front of her. "Let's make something real clear. That pier is mine. That water line belongs to this land. Your fence is trespassing." Karen held up the packet again like a weapon. "You're welcome to read the materials. Refusal to comply with HOA rules may result in daily fines and legal escalation. As of now, you are in violation." I never agreed to be part of any HOA. She smiled wider. "And yet, here you are, benefiting from shared community resources without contribution. It's not a negotiation, Mr. Thorne. It's governance." She turned, walked to her car like nothing happened, and drove off, tires neatly avoiding the soft patch near the pines. I stood there with the packet in my hand like it was radioactive. Inside, everything was printed with nauseating optimism. Full-color photos of happy paddleboarders, rules for dock aesthetics, guidelines for acceptable swimwear, and a codebook so bloated it made the IRS look like light reading, all backed by signatures from the county and a pre-approved zoning stamp. It was bureaucracy wearing lipstick. I called the zoning office again. The clerk who answered recognized my name this time. She sounded nervous. "We've received a number of challenges to the revised boundaries," she said. "The matter is under review." "How long?" "There's a lot of complexity," she hedged. "It might be a few weeks before we can formally respond." "Meanwhile, I'm fenced off my own land?" "There's an ongoing assessment. Please refrain from tampering with any structures until it's resolved." Click. I slammed the packet onto my kitchen table. HOA dues, fence codes, a map that moved my land without a single knock on my door. The air smelled like wood smoke and lies. That afternoon, I walked the length of the fence again. From the far edge near the willows, I could see my pier, lonely on the other side, like a dog locked in the neighbor's yard. The padlock gleamed in the sun. Just past it, a motion-activated security camera with a little red light blinked to life as I moved. That wasn't mine. I opened the shed, pulled out my old hiking gear, and retrieved a case I hadn't opened in years. Inside, my recon drone still in working condition from my Navy days. Lightweight, weather-resistant, long-range. It needed a charge, but it still purred when I powered it up. They wanted to play jurisdiction games. Fine. I had my own set of eyes now. And they didn't need a gate code. By dawn the next day, my kitchen smelled of coffee and engine oil. The drone sat on the table like an old war buddy waiting to be deployed. I swapped out the batteries, updated the firmware, and tested the camera feed on my laptop. The picture came through crisp and steady, perfect for a little lakeside reconnaissance. Outside, frost still rhymed the fence line like silver lace, but my hands were steady. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was evidence gathering. I stepped into the yard and launched the drone. Its rotors whirred softly as it lifted above the tree line. From that height, I could see the full absurdity of what they'd done. The fence wasn't just a simple barrier across my path. It ran in a perfect, unnatural line down the entire curve of the shoreline, cutting off the water from every non-HOA property it touched. My pier, my boat, my father's old canoe. All of it stranded behind a corporate prison yard. The drone's camera tilted, and the sign glared back at me in full HD. Silver Pines HOA, members only. It looked even uglier from the air. I followed the fence with the drone until it reached the old logging road. There, deep ruts showed where heavy equipment had come through. I zoomed in and snapped stills. Boot prints, tire patterns, even a discarded fast food bag with a date stamp from 3 weeks ago. Whoever built this had moved fast and quiet. I brought the drone back, swapped in a fresh battery, and programmed it for a night flight. If they'd built it under cover of darkness once, maybe they'd left more evidence behind. That evening, with the house dark and the lake like black glass, I sent the drone up again. Through the night vision, I caught shapes. Men with headlamps moving along the far end of the fence, adjusting something. A flatbed truck idling in the shadows. One man carried a clipboard, another hammered in new stakes beyond the original line. And then, clear as day, the woman herself, Karen Westbrook, in her vest and gloves, pointing, signing off on a tablet as the crew shifted the boundary markers further into my side. The drone's mic picked up her voice faintly. "This section belongs to the association now. Remove that old sign." A worker pried up my last private access marker and tossed it into the truck bed like scrap. I saved every second of footage to 3 separate drives and mailed a copy to myself certified. I wasn't going to let technical difficulties erase this one. The next morning, I printed stills and tacked them to my wall like a detective. There she was, caught red-handed, moving lines under cover of night. I needed a witness. The county wouldn't take my word alone. So I hiked through the backwoods to the Miller farm, where an old tractor operator named Todd sometimes worked odd jobs. He'd driven equipment for half the county and didn't owe the HOA anything. Over black coffee in his barn, I showed him a few stills on my phone, careful not to show the drone itself. His eyes widened. "Yeah, I hauled a skid steer down there a couple weeks back," he admitted. "That lady paid cash, said it was community improvement. Didn't smell right, but money's money." I asked if he'd be willing to sign a statement if it came to it. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Long as my name don't end up on Facebook, sure." On my way back, I stopped at the county survey office and hired an independent surveyor from the next county over, a woman named Elena, who'd done work for me before. She agreed to come out and run a GPS-based boundary check at sunrise. "If they've moved your line, it'll show," she said. "But be ready. If the new plat's on file, you're looking at a fight." That night, I sat on my porch with the drone controller on my lap, staring at the fence's blinking red camera. They thought they were the only ones watching. They thought my absence made me weak. Let them keep thinking that. Tomorrow, I'd have hard numbers, a witness, and footage. That's when this stops being a dispute and starts being a case. Elena arrived just after dawn, her SUV crunching over the frozen grass as a veil of fog still hung low over the lake. She was in her mid-30s, tough, no nonsense, with a laser rangefinder slung over one shoulder and a laptop under her arm. We shook hands in silence and got to work. I walked her along the old stone markers my father had set decades ago, the ones I'd double-checked more times than I could count. She didn't say much, just nodded and entered coordinates as we moved along the property line, every few steps planting a temporary flag. 2 hours later, Elena stood next to my shed, staring at her screen with her mouth set in a grim line. "Well," she said, "they've pushed the boundary by nearly 18 feet along the waterline. According to your deed and the 1997 plat, your property clearly extends down to the water. That fence cuts into it. No doubt about it." She tapped her screen. "I'll prepare a full affidavit and 3D overlay showing the original lines versus what's been built. You'll want that for court." I nodded, jaw tight. What's your take on the county approving a plat that contradicts the previous record? Elena gave a snort. Either someone didn't bother checking the original record or someone didn't want to. She glanced toward the camera on the fence. Either way, that thing's illegal. After she left, I felt a shift in the air. This wasn't just boundary creep anymore. It was fraud. I didn't have to wait long before things got worse. That afternoon, a thick envelope arrived via courier, HOA letterhead. Inside, a formal notice of violation from the Silver Pines Board claiming I had unlawfully accessed protected community property, namely the dock and shoreline, and demanding I pay $18,000 in damages. The claims were laughable. Unauthorized mooring of personal watercraft, destruction of community signage, damage to perimeter lock. It read like a parody lawsuit written by a bored paralegal on cocaine. I stood in my kitchen rereading the document when the phone rang. It was a clerk from the county civil court. "Mr. Thorne, you've been named in a civil action filed by the Silver Pines HOA. There's a preliminary hearing scheduled for next week regarding their claim and your use of the lakeside property." I let out a dry chuckle. Perfect timing. I spent that evening prepping. Every document, video, GPS overlay, and photograph. I organized them all into a binder thick enough to kill a man with. I scanned Todd's signed statement and added it to the file. He'd agreed to appear if needed. I backed everything up to cloud storage, a thumb drive, and an SD card I kept in my sock drawer. I wasn't about to let one technical glitch tank my case. The hearing took place at the county courthouse, a squat tan building with flickering fluorescents and a broken vending machine that had been out of order since the Bush administration. I sat across the table from Karen Westbrook, who arrived dressed like she was hosting a fundraiser, pastel blazer, pearl earrings, and a smugness that radiated like body heat. Her attorney, a stiff-necked guy with a Bluetooth headset still clipped to his ear, opened by presenting the new plat map and arguing that Mr. Thorne's property, per the latest zoning integration, now falls within the managed jurisdiction of the Silver Pines HOA. He slid the map across the table with a flourish, like it was holy writ. My turn. I calmly handed the clerk a copy of the 1997 agreement with the state, Elena's boundary overlay, drone stills of the fence construction, and Todd's notarized statement. "The map they submitted is based on forged or improperly reviewed data," I said. "My property line hasn't changed. They just built over it and hoped no one would notice. Here's video of them doing it at night." Karen tried to object, but the judge raised his hand. "Let's not interrupt Ms. Westbrook." The room went silent as the clerk projected the drone footage on the screen. There she was, in full color, signing off plans in the middle of the night, standing next to my dock with construction workers hammering away. The judge leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Ms. Westbrook, who authorized this construction?" Karen blinked. "The board, Your Honor. We had internal meetings and consulted with county officials." The judge tapped his pen. "I see no record of a formal review or approval from the zoning committee, nor do I see any notification sent to Mr. Thorne prior to construction." He turned to the clerk. "Place a hold on enforcement of all HOA fines against Mr. Thorne pending resolution of the boundary dispute. And order a temporary cease and desist on any HOA modifications to the lake perimeter." Karen shifted in her seat, her jaw tight. Her lawyer asked for a recess to prepare supplementary documentation. The judge gave them 72 hours. I knew damn well what that meant. They were scrambling. Good. After the session, Karen cornered me outside the courthouse. "You think you've won something," she hissed. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You want to play dirty fine, but I play harder." I stared her down. "Good, because now I know exactly what you're willing to lie about, and I'm just getting started." She didn't respond, just turned and stormed off, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. It started with silence. That's how you know something's coming. Not when it gets loud, but when everything gets just a little too quiet. No new letters, no calls, not even a drive-by from Karen's white Lexus. For 2 whole days, the HOA went completely dark. I wasn't stupid enough to think that meant they were backing down. On the 3rd night, around 1 in the morning, my internet dropped. Just blinked out mid-refresh while I was reviewing some zoning regulations. I ran a diagnostic. Router was fine. Cable to the house, not so much. I threw on boots and went out with a flashlight. The line had been cleanly severed, clipped right where it snaked along the side of the cabin toward the main utility pole. Not chewed, not worn, cut, clean. Deliberate. I followed the tracks in the frost around the side of the house. Faint boot prints, large tread, leading off into the woods toward the back trail, the same one the construction crew had used weeks earlier. I didn't call the sheriff right away. Instead, I walked straight back into the house and pulled up the feed from my drone. I'd set it to auto patrol in a wide circle over the property at night, a habit I'd developed since this whole circus began. I scanned the footage from midnight to 1:30. There, time-stamped and clear as day, two figures in hooded jackets creeping along my side fence. One of them carried bolt cutters. The other scanned the area with a flashlight. 5 minutes later, the cable went down. A few frames later, the red camera light on the HOA's fence-side security system suddenly turned off. They weren't just trespassing now. They were sabotaging my property and destroying evidence. I saved the footage, time-stamped and backed up, and then did call the sheriff. This time, the deputy who arrived wasn't one of the usual small-town boys in a beat-up cruiser. This one was from the county's central office, and he took one look at the footage and started taking real notes. "You've got drones running automated surveillance?" he asked, half impressed. "Veteran habit," I said. "Good thing, too." The next morning, things accelerated. Elena, the surveyor, called. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I got an anonymous tip this morning. Somebody claiming the HOA submitted another updated plat map with even more adjustments to neighboring shoreline lots. I pulled it. It's real. They filed it 2 days ago, right after your hearing." I was stunned. "That's after the judge issued the hold." "Exactly," she said. "That's a direct violation of a court order. I had her send me copies. This new map showed not just my shoreline, but 3 other adjacent lots shifted even further inland, including 2 that I knew belonged to families who only visited in summer. One of those properties was marked as HOA Common Recreational Access. The land grab wasn't just bold now, it was blatant. I reached out to the owners. One of them, a woman named Leah Sutter, picked up. "Wait, what?" she said when I explained what I'd found. "I haven't been up there since September. You're telling me they redrew my lake access again? Filed it with the county. I've got the documents." "Holy hell," she muttered. "My dad bought that land in the 70s. That shoreline's been ours longer than Karen's had plastic surgery." We agreed to meet that weekend. She offered to bring coffee. I offered drone footage. That night, I received another gift in my mailbox. No return address, just a plain manila envelope, slid under my door like a ransom note. Inside were photocopies of what looked like internal HOA emails, printed from someone's inbox. I skimmed them quickly. They were time-stamped and real. One of them was from Karen to a board member discussing how to get non-members quietly absorbed into the community model without triggering litigation. Another email talked about pre-approving plat changes through county contacts before they hit public review. I sat down hard in my chair. Someone inside the HOA was leaking, and they wanted me to have this. I scanned every page, encrypted them, and uploaded the files to a secure archive with access granted to my attorney and one trusted contact. Then I called Leah. "You might want to get involved sooner than later," I said. "This isn't just about a dock anymore." She didn't hesitate. "Let's burn them to the ground." The next day, I contacted the local paper. I wasn't trying to go public yet, but I wanted to be ready if things went south. The editor, an old-timer named Vince, agreed to meet privately. I showed him the drone footage, the emails, the maps. His eyes lit up like he'd just struck oil. "They tried to privatize the lake?" he muttered. "That's going to make some waves." I didn't say yes, didn't say no, but I left him with a flash drive. Then came the knock on the door. I opened it to find a man in a charcoal suit holding a clipboard. He didn't introduce himself, just handed me a letter. "Notice of code inspection," he said. "Your septic permit's under review. Someone filed a complaint about potential contamination into public water resources." I didn't even blink. "You work for the HOA." "I work for the county. This is a formal notice." I took the paper and smiled. "Great. Be sure to check their side of the lake while you're at it. I hear they've been fertilizing like it's a golf course." He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. I stood there on my porch, holding the new notice, watching his car disappear down the road. The war had officially gone nuclear. By Saturday morning, my cabin looked less like a quiet lakeside retreat and more like a forward operations post. I'd stacked up printed plats, laminated drone stills, copies of court filings, and internal HOA emails like a man preparing for war. Leah Sutter arrived right on time, rolling up in a Subaru caked with road salt and Vermont stickers. She stepped out, to-go coffee in one hand and a rolled-up blueprint tube in the other, and sized me up like we were about to go rob a bank. "Tell me this is as bad as it looks," she said. "It's worse," I replied, and we headed inside. Over coffee, I laid it all out for her. The redrawn maps, the overnight construction, the surveillance sabotage, the planted inspection notice. She listened silently, nodding occasionally, her jaw tightening more with every page. When I showed her the email about absorbing non-members quietly, she let out a low whistle. "That's racketeering," she said. "Borderline," I said, "and definitely fraud." She unrolled her own map, a high-resolution cadastral layout from 1997 signed by both our fathers. "See this? This line hasn't moved in decades, and now it's 3 feet into dry land, with a locked gate on top of it." We both knew what had to happen next. That afternoon, Leah and I visited the county courthouse, together, in person. We requested to see all submitted plat updates for the Silver Pines Waterfront HOA over the past year. The clerk raised an eyebrow, but complied. We sat in the cold fluorescent light, flipping through binders, and sure enough, there were 3 different filings, each more aggressive than the last, all bearing Karen Westbrook's signature, all notarized, questionably, and each referencing an approval from the same junior land officer, Thomas Greeley. I recognized the name. He was the one who'd stalled my own request weeks ago, saying they were reviewing overlays. We added that to the list. The next stop was the sheriff's office. I handed over a second drive containing the sabotage footage, plus stills showing the workers removing my signage and relocating markers, including clear frames of Karen herself overseeing it. The deputy I spoke to, a woman named Rossetti, seemed to grasp the weight of it. She asked for copies, logged a formal incident report, and promised to escalate this to the fraud division. I wasn't holding my breath, but it was movement. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't done playing games. On Monday, I received a civil demand letter from the HOA's attorney, one Joseph H. Riker Eskritzer, a local name I recognized from real estate circles. The letter accused me of criminal trespassing, property damage, and endangering a community structure, specifically the unauthorized use of HOA waterfront facilities, i.e. my own dock. They demanded restitution of $18,000, removal of my vessel, and cease and desist from further disruption of HOA property. They even had the nerve to include a still frame from their own security camera showing me stepping over the HOA's gate, the one built across my land. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee, but Leah wasn't laughing. "This is it," she said. "This is how they lock people out. Not just physically, legally. They bury you in paper. If you didn't have this documentation, they'd drown you." I called my attorney, forwarded everything, and authorized a formal counterclaim. But something still bothered me. That frame of me stepping over the fence. How'd they get it? The HOA camera had been off. My drone caught that clearly. I went back through the files. That's when I saw it. The HOA camera had gone down at 1:13 a.m. Their screenshot was timestamped 1:22 a.m., 9 minutes after the power cut, which meant only one thing. The image was faked, or the camera was never actually down, and someone lied on the inspection report submitted to the county. I added that discrepancy to the pile and began drafting an affidavit. I'd learned a long time ago, when a fight moves from the field to the courtroom, paper is ammo. That week, Leah and I began reaching out to other property owners along the lake. We went door to door, knocking, explaining, sharing maps and photos. Some were skeptical at first, retirees, weekenders, quiet types. But as soon as they saw the overlapping plats and the HOA's plans to reclassify public shoreline as recreational access, they got angry. One older couple, the Wilkins, showed us a notice they'd received the month before, an invitation to streamline community membership by signing a pre-filled application form. No terms, no fee, just a signature, classic bait, and switch. We set up a group email chain. Within 3 days, we had 6 landowners willing to sign on as co-plaintiffs in a fraud complaint. We called ourselves the Thorn Line Group, a name Leah insisted on, smirking at me the entire time. I didn't argue. As the week ended, I received one final surprise. Elena, my surveyor, called from a burner number. I can't talk long, she whispered, but I heard through someone I trust. Karen's map wasn't just filed through the land office, it was fast-tracked. By who? Greeley. But here's the kicker. He used to serve on the Silver Pines HOA board. I checked. 2 years ago. I sat back, letting the weight of that settle. Thanks, I said. That's more than enough. No, I thought. This wasn't a land dispute anymore. This was a conspiracy. And now I had a trail. The courthouse was colder than usual that morning. Maybe it was just my nerves. I sat with Leah at one end of the bench, folder in my lap, thumb brushing over the hard plastic of the flash drive we were about to submit. Across the aisle sat Karen Westbrook, flanked by 2 lawyers in matching navy suits and smug expressions. She didn't look at me, just whispered something to her attorney, then dabbed at her lips with a tissue like she was preparing for a photo shoot. Our motion was simple. Request for injunctive relief, an emergency stay on enforcement of the HOA's boundaries. Leah filed it with all the supporting evidence, drone footage, timestamp inconsistencies, maps, and notarized statements from 5 other landowners. We didn't ask for damages, not yet, just to freeze their game before they stole more. The judge, an older man named Hallstrom, didn't waste time. He flipped through our exhibits with a practiced eye, asked 2 questions about plat registration timelines, then turned to the HOA's side. Karen's lawyer stood up and launched into a speech about community cohesion, protection of shared interests, and my long-standing refusal to participate in the neighborhood ecosystem. I leaned toward Leah. What ecosystem? My neighbor is a deer. She elbowed me hard. Then came the twist. The HOA introduced their own survey map, stamped and signed, supposedly official. Except one detail jumped out immediately. The signature from the county clerk was different than on our certified documents. Hallstrom caught it too. He asked for clarification. Karen's attorney mumbled something about a clerical variant. Leah pulled out a printed signature comparison and handed it over. 5 minutes later, court was adjourned for 2 days. The judge wanted verification from the county records office. Outside, Karen approached me. Her voice was quiet, but the venom was there. You've made this much bigger than it had to be. I smiled. No, Karen, you did. I'm just the guy who hit record. That night, I received a text from someone I didn't expect, Officer Rossetti. She asked if we could talk, said she had something urgent. We met the next morning behind the sheriff's station. She handed me a printed incident report. Anonymous tip came in, she said. Said you were trespassing on private land with malicious intent. But get this, the address listed is your own cabin. I stared at her. They're trying to flip the narrative, she added. Make you look unstable, hostile. It's a smear campaign. Leah and I doubled down. We filed an ethics complaint with the state board, citing the HOA's false filings, harassment attempts, and the conflict of interest involving Greeley. We attached emails, video, maps, and the tip-off report Rossetti gave me. It was thick, ugly, enough to get attention. 2 days later, the judge ruled in our favor. All HOA actions and enforcements paused until full audit. Karen's face was stone. And then came the real bombshell. Leah's old friend in the State Land Registrar's office called, said they'd reviewed the HOA's plat filings, and not only were they forged, but they were fraudulently expedited using Greeley's override key, bypassing standard verification. That was criminal. By the end of the week, a state investigator was knocking on my door. Now it wasn't just about land. It was fraud, forgery, abuse of authority, and it was finally blowing wide open. By the time the state investigator arrived, my cabin no longer felt like a quiet sanctuary. It felt like the eye of a storm. Agent Camille Hargrove wasn't what I expected. She was sharp, mid-40s, former prosecutor turned investigator for the Vermont State Attorney's Office, and she didn't waste time. She asked for every document we had, every file, every minute of drone footage. I handed over a neatly labeled drive. Her brow lifted slightly when she saw the folders. You cataloged all this yourself. Let's just say I'm familiar with evidence chains. The investigation escalated fast. Greeley, the official who signed off on the fake map, was suspended within 48 hours. Emails leaked. Turns out he had a quiet history of expedited approvals for HOAs, Karen's being one of them. Worse, there was a money trail. HOA funds rerouted into a private consulting account he shared with Karen's brother-in-law. That flipped the whole narrative. Subpoenas landed like thunder. Karen was called in for a deposition. 2 other board members lawyered up immediately. One of them, a wiry man named Bennett, flipped. He gave a sworn statement saying Karen had been coercing property owners into HOA membership for years, sometimes offering favors, other times threatening legal retaliation. He admitted he'd helped forge at least 3 maps. The trial date was expedited due to public interest. Local media caught wind. HOA scandal at Silver Pines. And suddenly, I wasn't just the quiet guy on the lake. I was a walking headline. At trial, Leah was a machine. Calm, razor-sharp, methodical. She laid out the drone footage frame by frame, the midnight fence construction, Karen directing workers, the removal of my original marker stake. The judge leaned forward during the footage of Greeley's forged stamp being matched to prior verified signatures. It was surgical. Karen's defense crumbled. Her lawyers tried to paint it as a misunderstanding of jurisdiction, but no one bought it. When the jury heard the audio, Karen telling a contractor, "Don't worry, this old guy won't even notice we shifted the line," it was over. The verdict? Karen, guilty on 4 counts: fraud, forgery, illegal land seizure, conspiracy to defraud. Greeley, indicted pending federal review. The Silver Pines HOA, dissolved by court order. A restitution fund of over $430,000 was ordered to compensate the landowners Karen had scammed. The fences were ordered torn down and access to the lake restored under county oversight. My deed was publicly reaffirmed, my property line reinstated, and that ridiculous members-only sign, I burned it in the fireplace with a glass of bourbon in hand. In the aftermath, I didn't go quiet. I gave interviews, helped neighbors file their own complaints. I even started giving free workshops at the local library. Know your deed. Karen's case became a state-level cautionary tale. And me? I rebuilt the dock, sat by the water one early morning with coffee and a rod in hand, hung a new sign on a cedar post right by the shoreline. Property of E. Thorne. Public lake access preserved by law. Trespassers with fake maps will be famous. Then I boxed up the drone and mailed it to the local high school science department. Let the next generation record the truth.